Good morning, everyone. My name is Roy Cervantes. I'm with the California Charter Schools Association. I'm the Regional Director for Policy and Advocacy in Los Angeles. I'll be moderating this panel on lessons learned in co-locations. We'll go ahead and get started. The bios for all the panelists are in the blue folder on the left side. Feel free to peruse that at your leisure, but wanted to give some time for our panelists to introduce themselves. If you could just take a minute, let everyone know your name, position, and where your school is, how long you've been co-located in that situation, or in general. We'll go ahead to my left.
All right, Mark Klieger. Hi, good morning, everybody. I am the Chief Operating Officer at an organization called the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, which is a turnaround network started by Mayor Villaraigosa 6 years ago. We operate a network of 16 schools in South LA, Boyle Heights, and Watts, basically through a contract with the district. So we are district schools, but we're essentially the management organization to run the school, so all the staff are still district staff. But we do, and we manage the facility, consistent with district policy, and we have several locations, both between our network as well as with other outside organizations. So happy to talk about it.
I'm Ted Morris, and I'm the co-director of Endeavor College Prep, which is a charter school on the east side. We're kindergarten to 8th grade, split across 3 different co-locations. Kindergarten to 3rd grade is at the Dina campus in South Boyle Heights. 4, 5, 6 is at Ann Street Elementary, close to Chinatown, and 7th and 8th grade is at Albion Elementary in Lincoln Heights. I had originally founded a charter school called Futuro Prep, and last year we merged with our sister school, which was a middle school. So now we're K-8, and as the co-director, the colleague who founded Endeavor, she's in charge of academics, teacher support, student culture, things like that, and I'm on the operations side. So I can talk to you about the co-location arrangements we've had over the years. We've been at 4 different co-locations, including the 3 that we're on, plus we had originally opened at El Sereno Elementary as well. And so I've had a lot of different perspectives working with different leaders in different communities through those years.
Good morning. My name is Kenya Jackson. I'm the principal at View Park Prep Middle School. We co-locate at Crenshaw High School. We just completed a year. Prior to that, at my 6th grade campus, our students co-located at an Alliance school on 70th. So this is my 2nd year with a co-location experience, one with the district, one with the charter school.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you again. Steve Enns, Quincy Jones Elementary School. We share campus with Synergy Charter Academy. Some people were asking me what school we're kindergarten through 5th grade. We have 365 kids. Synergy Charter Academy has 360. 365. They have 360. We opened in 2010. We're located at Central and Jefferson, so literally the historic South Central corridor there.
Great. So here's how I'll propose that we just structure this time. There are a couple bullet points on the agenda that just topics we wanted to cover. Hopefully we can spend maybe about 5 minutes on each one. We could obviously talk about any one of these categories all day long, but I want to make sure we have the rest of the time for some general dialogue and questions for everyone, and then we can go more into depth about any of those topics. So we can go ahead and start with communication protocols. I'd like to just ask this question to you, Mark, and panelists, feel free to chime in and respond. In terms of,
can I ask a question? It'd be really helpful for me for context, even if it's just a show of hands, like who's leadership, who's teachers, who's district school, who's charter, just to know
absolutely
what context we might be trying to address.
We can definitely do that. So let's throw it out in broader categories. So district principals in the room, raise your hand. Great. District staff, charter school principals, and or charter staff. Great. Any other category that I left out? Because you have to identify yourself. All right. So okay, for communication protocols. I think we heard in the morning, and in general, school leaders generally emphasize the importance of communication for successful co-location. Can you talk about any specific strategies that you or your schools have taken to ensure that? And is there anything you might change in retrospect?
Maybe I'll just quickly describe the variety of co-locations we've had, because my thinking would be it depends on the context. So we have anywhere from City of Angels, which some folks may know is a small program, a couple classrooms for essentially students in an alternative environment, high school students. We have a co-location on a middle school campus at Hollenbeck Middle School. We have charters co-located at Prop 39. We had an alliance school at Hollenbeck as well, as an example. We have a permanent co-location set up at Jordan High School, where the partnership and Green Dot Public Schools are working side by side, and that's set up kind of as an indefinite arrangement. It's not an annual Prop 39 process. And we serve the geographic area of Jordan High School and those students. We had Roosevelt High School, which was originally a comprehensive school with 4,800 students, that was turned into a co-location of 7 small schools, all within the partnerships, kind of management. So it was within our entity, but it had multiple schools. Some of those schools have now consolidated back, but there's still multiple schools on the same campus co-located. And if I were to kind of distill the broad theme, but then I think how you apply it may differ, is communication between the school leaders is the paramount piece, and developing that collegial relationship so that you can sort of have informal problem solving rather than make everything kind of a formalized process. I think when it becomes overly formalized, it can slow things down, in my experience, and it can actually, so decisions don't get made in a timely way, which is in a school environment, things happen every day, and things need to keep moving. So it allows that to happen. It also allows kind of creative problem solving, so you can get win-win situations where it might be an us versus them perceived mentality. You can actually do some creative problem solving, school leader to school leader, or maybe with some assistant principals in the mix. And that's where we've seen the greatest success. So like at Jordan High School, which is a good example, the school leaders work on a variety of things. That campus is in a lot of chaos right now. They're rebuilding the entire campus, and every year there's a 3.5-year phased redevelopment, $68 million district-funded project, where every year the students are moving, the path of travel is changing, who's going where is changing. It's a very chaotic environment, as you can imagine. But the school leaders are doing most of the problem solving together, and I think that's a really solid example. There have been some, like when Jordan was getting started, Green Dot and the partnership did set up a more structured process, because as we were dealing with all the issues around student enrollment, because we were actually drawing from the same student enrollment pool and on that project, or we dealt with the original location on the campus of who's going where and what path of travel was going to look like before the construction project started. Some formalization was very helpful there, and then we phased it out, essentially. And then it became much more kind of less structured and more informal. Some projects, though, I think do require, when it's very complex, ongoing structures to be in place around communication. So at Roosevelt, where we had 7 small schools on the same campus, we actually had a shared decision-making committee that had bylaws written and clearly established that met monthly, and there was a clear series of topics that committee dealt with, and a clear series of topics that committee didn't deal with. And we defined what those were, and we, as the outside entity, running the project, we kind of facilitated the meetings, and so it helped have an outside organization doing that. I'm not sure if anyone is dealing with a situation that complex, but those are some examples.
And just for clarification, ideally, how early would that communication start to happen between co-located leaders?
The day the Prop 39 is granted, or and really, as soon as possible. So I'll give you another example. Right now we have a STEM pilot being located at Hollenbeck now that the Alliance left. The pilot school was approved by the district. It's being co-located at Hollenbeck. We've been working with district staff in the pilot division for months on that. And we've been working with the teacher leaders in this case until they hired a principal, and now that they have a principal, we're working with the principal. And it's about what is it they're trying to achieve with their instructional program? What is it that Roosevelt High School and Hollenbeck Middle School have to offer? And how can we actually think about it as a collective effort where the Roosevelt students, because Roosevelt's across the street, so there's a lot of access to Roosevelt in this particular case, where the Roosevelt students aren't negatively impacted and the STEM pilot students are positively served. And how can you actually find the common ground for those two environments? We're actually the other piece about communication is in that project, we're actually gonna write an MOU essentially that codifies the agreements. We didn't do that in the Green Dot case, but we did do that in the Roosevelt carve up of the 7 schools. And I think sometimes having things in writing that you can refine if they're not working out also very, very helpful.
Any other panelists care to respond or elaborate on any situation in your own school about communication? We heard a little bit from Steve about in the morning, but any other?
I would say make sure you've got scheduled meetings between the leadership, especially in the beginning. If it becomes organic and you feel like you don't need it, that might be fine. But I found when we merged last summer, I had been used to being on one campus all the time. So the principal, Adina, and I have a really good relationship. We could work through things. But when we merged and I'm now spreading my time across the 3 campuses, I don't see him as frequently. I really noticed this year that the communication got much more difficult, where you want to have it regular enough so that when an issue comes up that's a difficult issue, you've already got a relationship. And this year, because I wasn't seeing him as frequently, when we actually did make time to talk to each other, it was usually because there was some big issue. It was a lot less comfortable and a lot less easy to work through than it had been the previous year, where we just had these conversations every couple of weeks and just kind of got a pulse check for how things were. And as far as how early, I would just, is anybody going into a new co-location this year? I mean, it's probably, you're probably already there because the school's about to start, but I would just advise everybody not to have their first meeting without somebody from Prop 39 office there or something to sort of set the ground rules and sort of this is, otherwise it becomes sort of a who's going to be the alpha dog and who's going to, how much do I get to say and you get to say. And it was just really helpful for me each time we had a new one to have somebody from Prop 39 there to just sort of lay the ground rules and sort of set it up as a partnership.
I would just like to add to what you said earlier, Mark, about informal conversations with people that you're working with, and then also extending yourself outside of just the school site principal, because that person, just like you, are going to be extremely busy. I brought muffins to the plant manager because he has all the keys. If the bathroom is flooded, he can come over or send somebody over. So you have to communicate with people who are just as important in the trench work of operating a school. And because I didn't have an assistant principal or a director of operation or anyone, it was just me. So I had to identify those people who were very important to the day-to-day operations of running a school. And that's the plant manager, the school aides, the person that's the proximity to where, if you establish where your students are transitioning to and from, get to know that person, get to know the office staff, your office staff at your school site as well as theirs. They need to be best friends because our mail comes through their office, they have to deliver the mail. So those are the relationships that are extremely important because they will ensure that you're looking at your calendar, that you're making those scheduled meetings, that they keep us informed about our calendar. We'll sit and plan and say that's great, and then the day is coming up. So you really need to make sure that you establish shared priorities and build those relationships with, like I said, the office staff, school police, the school aides, the secretaries. All of those people are extremely important to the day-to-day operations of both school sites.
Great. Steve, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that you've heard me give most of the spiel, and Mark, I agree with the formal and informal process, starting with the formal, leading to the informal. But just a couple of key things to remember is it's the little things that make a big difference. Like when you talk to your staff, You definitely don't, you have to be aware that you're not saying, well, that's them, or that's the other school. That type of vocabulary will tend to create a divide. So really be aware of what you're saying to your staff and to the kids, to the school, because it's all about us. And if you start with that point, it will help to eliminate that divisiveness. Just something as simple as that. Again, from the formal to the informal, that's all about trust. You got to build a relationship of trust with the other administrator. So that's part of the process, and from what you're talking about, that's part as well. If you don't have that trust there, then you got someone who's going to go ahead and they're going to see what they're going to do, and that's it, which is that's problematic. And then the last part is just consistency with protocols. Be consistent, meaning the two main factors I keep leaning on this over and over again, safety, because at the end of the day, everyone loses if one child gets hurt or killed or anything like that. Doesn't matter which school you are, doesn't matter your API, whether it's Crenshaw High School or your school, it doesn't matter. One child from any school who gets hurt, killed, you don't want that. So where do you start? You start with the safety first, I feel, because that's a grounding point where it's immediate and it's involving everybody. So that's one of the key points, I would say.
Just one other quick point on that is I think communication protocols among the staff, just building on what you said. So where staff to staff start problem solving issues, it gets more challenging in my experience versus communication protocols within each school that then have the channels to problem solve across schools. It can get really complicated if everyone's trying to solve everyone's problems. And so setting up both the language, I agree with what you're saying, but also the communication protocol in your school and within the co-located school.
I would piggyback on to that. The other thing with the communication protocol, with some of the biggest problems that you will encounter or that you've already probably encountered would be the way a student from one school is behaving and different type of positive school-wide behavior protocols. And if you have some sort of commonality and you come together and that's part of the meeting and you bring the best of what you bring, the other school brings the best of what they bring, and you create a common structure where every adult understands the school-wide positive behavior plan and the structure, that will actually eliminate some of the issues that you'll see between staff members. Because the staff member from a school or another school can come up to you and say, boy, that kid's misbehaving, but they don't know how to solve that problem. So if you have a commonality, then everyone has a clear understanding of how to approach it.
I'd like to go back to the previous example you gave about student safety, on-campus safety. For anyone on the panel, how have your schools coordinated with your co-located partner or partners to address safety in particular? And please be as specific as you can be. And has it been resolved, or is it sort of an ongoing issue, or are there any lingering issues?
I can speak on that. Initially, when we had the unpopular decision of co-locating at Crenshaw High School, which has a historically, just the perception of the high school and the student population there, we had to fight against that perception with the parents and to ensure that, your kids are our kids, it's the same, we're in this together. So we had a cadre formed before we moved in with parents. And so we walked through the campus and they identified what safety meant for them and for their students. And so before we even sat at the table with the principal and district representative, we talked about what can we do on our own to ensure the safety of our students, not because we think, all these kids are the boogeyman or they're gonna come and do something horrible to kids, but what can we do on our end that's a part of district policy, because as a charter school, you're just used to implementing and going ahead with your decision, and you're not vetting those decisions, or you don't have to go through certain processes like you would have to do at a district school. So one of those was a school police but we couldn't hire armed guards, so we have unarmed guards. We have 3 gates that are entrances. One, we have a lot that's visitors parking lot, and the other lot is for my staff. And they're not electronic. You have to old school lock them with the lock. And school opens at 7:30. That means from 7:30 to 8:15, which gates can remain open? Who's gonna watch the gates? One of the things that we knew we needed was a security gate from the visitors parking lot. Well, in a perfect world, you have that before school starts, but it doesn't happen that way. So you have to wait. We got it after Christmas break, our security gate. But for us, we said, well, this is where the security person is going to be situated, here by this gate. We also have another gate that leads our students out to the PE field. That gate needs to be closed. So we have all this open space, and we had to talk about who was going to guard the gate and how we're going to track people coming in and out of our campus. Because a lot of people thought it was still Crenshaw High School, so we'd get kids to come over or try to sneak through to get to the yard there. And so we had to be strategic on our own just by observation. I just sat in the car and watched when school started what we needed to do and how we needed to refine our plan. So we were able to get a security guard, an unarmed guard. Our school police did an in-service for my staff. So that we set up a walkie-talkie system, and we didn't have phones for the first 3 months of school. So we used our walkies a lot, and we haven't had any incident regarding a high school or middle school student, and none whatsoever. I talk to the kids because they're our kids. So I feel like safety, relationship, also having those drills in place and knowing who to go to and where you're supposed to be when you have earthquake drills or active shooter drills and those sorts of things. Being aware of your space, not just the space that you're sharing with your co-located partner, but also just the environment and how to manage that piece on a budget.
Mark, Steve?
I just have a couple of quick concrete things for you. The first one is do your drills together. That's crucial because no matter what, when you really have a situation, you got to both be on the same page. So drills together, I mentioned make sure the committee is a campus committee and everyone's doing that. Your search and rescue is a combined team. So I combine both schools have faculty members on their search and rescue teams. Let's see, after school program, this is very crucial. After school program does drills separately from your in-school drills. Make sure both after school programs do the drills together. You know, you have this transition between after school programs. Leadership with those after school programs change. And you know, there have been a few times I'd have to really educate those leaders that they're working together. They're not in their own worlds. So another one is walkie-talkie is a big issue. Just remember that if you have an emergency, typically what happens is the charter school has their own walkie-talkie, you have your own walkie-talkie, but you're screwed if you're in a real situation and you can't communicate to each other. So that was the first thing I did, was make sure that we both had walkie-talkies from both campuses so we could communicate.
So there's a channel that you share with the school?
No, they're actually just two physically different walkie-talkies. And ironically, what makes it great, you ask benefits of having another school on campus, their walkie-talkie works much better than the LAUSD walkie-talkie because LAUSD only has 3 or 4 frequencies for the entire district. So you're getting a lot of gibberish and garbage from other schools. But with a charter school, they don't have that limited structure. So their walkie-talkie will actually be more clear and more effective during time of emergency. The last one is the off-site meeting, making sure that, again, that you come together as a campus. This is your off meeting site as a campus. That way you don't have issues. If the charter school decides to use another location, what could possibly happen is some of your kids go to that location for the emergency. If there's an active shooter or whatever it is. So combine both schools making one off-site meeting location, which is ours is actually ironic. Ironically, it's another charter school. And then we did a trade saying, well, if you have an active shooter, you come to our school. So that quid pro quo.
I would say for the walkie-talkies on 2 of our 3 campuses, our office just has another LAUSD issued walkie-talkie that we're on the same frequency. And that's actually helpful for us because, well, especially at our K3 campus, because those of you who work with kindergartners, there's times that you need to call the custodian, and this way we're not bothering their front office to call the custodian for us. So we're directly on the same line, and we can call him directly and have him for cleanups and things like that. But then also, in the case of an emergency, those are just always on, and we can hear. And it is a little bit of, there's a lot of filtering of conversations we don't need to be listening to, but it's worth it for the times when you do need it. The other thing I'd say for safety, and this is probably going to cross over a little bit. I see, coming up, we're talking about schedule coordination, drop-off dismissal. If those of you that are new this year, let me just say that out of my experience, I think the biggest thing that we underestimated, and you should start thinking about this now, is arrival and dismissal. Like if you're going to do like a valet drop-off or things like that, as a charter school, and this is also kind of jumping ahead on other things with the recruitment, we intentionally didn't recruit very heavily from the immediate area. We didn't want to be seen as like coming to take the kids away. I'm really sensitive to that. It's one of the complaints about charter schools is they're taking our kids, and so we have a gentleman's agreement at all of our co-locations. We are gonna recruit for students, but not in your attendance boundary. We're gonna go to the next schools over and things like that to get the word out about our school. But the effect of that is that many of our families then are coming in cars, and in schools where two of our campuses are right in the middle of housing projects, and the kids all come from those projects, so they're walking. This morning traffic thing is all new to them, and they're like, so that's of course all blamed on us. We're the bad guy that makes it hard for them to get out of their driveways and things like that. So really think through that as far as just from a convenience standpoint, but the safety issue is really where it becomes really essential, and the principals of the other schools get very sensitive to, like, if there's any kind of a traffic safety thing, that's got to be addressed right away.
I think 30 minutes is a healthy transition time before school and after school. If you can, wherever you are, situate your bell schedule so you have at least 30 minutes. 15 minutes, it didn't work in my case with the high school and middle school, so I had to change my bell schedule within the first week of school, the dismissal time and start time.
Just a couple other quick thoughts to add. In some cases, the schools have jointly funded safety resources. So at Jordan High School is the best example for us. What happens in the community can trickle into the school community and vice versa, and the kids may be in different schools but live next door to each other. And so in recognition of that, we jointly fund a safe passage program at Jordan. And so that's an individual who's actually been in the community, working in the community a long time, has huge credibility, and is actively communicating with the principals on a daily basis, is on campus quite a bit. It's a district, actually was originally had that program when the two of us started working on that campus. And so we also do the same with school police and campus aides and other safety personnel on the campus, and so they're kind of jointly managed between the principals. And in that case, it works very, very effectively because it's two schools, it's the same level, it's not a middle school, high school situation. So you're dealing with very similar challenges around safety. I think the other thing that we have found is trying to identify a few key issues that fit with your school model. So like a couple issues that come up is like path of travel. So some schools really feel strongly that we want to have our own identity that is really independent and protected. Some schools feel less so, so they say, well, we like the kids to be able to interact with each other, and we see benefits in that. So some of those conversations and more like the philosophy that underpins decisions, I think is really important to get on the table, because where you land on that spectrum of independence, kind of private nature versus let's share resources and things like that will dictate path of travel and those kinds of issues. And so in some cases we have completely separate gates for the schools to enter, even if they're in the same level. And in some cases we don't. And I think that's a really important distinction to make that will differ for everybody's circumstances. Another one where that plays out is uniforms. So what the uniform philosophy is of the two schools dictates, how you address some of those issues. In our experience, all of our schools do uniforms, and I think all of the charters co-located also do uniforms on our campuses. It actually helps in safety a lot because you set up accountability with that student and the adult they're interacting with in a way that's very different than if you don't know where that kid goes to school. So in our experience, it's been very helpful, but again, that may differ for folks in the room. I think where the greatest challenges that we've had is around kind of student behavioral expectations, and where the schools are, let's say they bleed together a little bit more, and ensuring that where the consistency is across the whole campus and where it's not. So some schools may have different expectations for their students, some schools may have the exact same expectation, because that the kind of student to adult accountability can get very muddy if that's not clear. So for example, we've had experiences where students walking across campus in the middle of class and an adult asks them to return to class and that kid says, I don't know anything to you, you're not in my school. And so you run into issues like that if the kind of expectations aren't set clearly across the campus.
Yeah, that's my point, saying make sure that everyone understands the protocols and the similarity. Again, you can keep your individuality of that school, of your school. No one's saying to give that up.
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, for you, how many times have we heard borrow best practices, right? Well, here's the prime opportunity to really build upon that. And so, yeah.
And I think that's where, and then staff communication becomes critical, because how staff implement that in the field. I mean, all of those issues can get complicated or can work fabulously.
I would pitch in here too. The key, if you have issues between two groups of students from your school and the other school, to address that right away, and address that with the other administrators. So making sure their administrators, first you get your plan together with the other administrator to address it, because that will tend to resolve the problem. Also, it shows that there's uniformity, that the expectation from all adults on campus are the same. So that helped to eliminate a lot of issues as well.
On a similar theme, Ted, could you talk about sort of shared staff and services on your campus, if you have any positions that you're sharing with your co-located campuses, any sort of challenges or suggestions for improvement on that?
Well, we share the maintenance team, and technically in Prop 39, the charters don't pay rent. We pay our share of the maintenance fees. And I had mentioned to Becca when she was putting the panel together, that's something that I'm actually pretty excited about and passionate about, but I'm not an expert on. I don't have the answers. I'm very interested in it because I think the LA Unified could be doing that better. And I think that the charter schools pay quite a bit of money to the M&O line item, and I think the number's like 48 cents on the dollar actually comes back to the school site. Most of that is residing at the district level, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to try to come up with a solution on how the district could handle that more efficiently, and I think that there would even be opportunities for it to become almost an incentive for those of you that are district leaders, to be the host for charter schools. If you were getting some discretionary use of that money that you could use to improve your own site, and I would be a huge advocate for that if there's any way we could convince the power to be to move that direction.
Sean Jernigan basically said that as well this morning.
Yeah, and I missed this morning because we had today was our first day with our leadership team back planning for August, but I know Sean's done research on that, and it's just been circular, where they he does all this thing, and finally gets to the last person, and they said, oh, well, they told us to ask you about it. So, so yeah, I think that would be maybe the future where Prop 39 could go.
I can actually chime in there. At the beginning, so we've been partnered for 5 years. At the very beginning, M&O, one of the benefits was that at the beginning of the next school year, the 2011-2012 school year, all of a sudden I had an additional $10,000 to $15,000. I was like, well, where's this from? I remember Pete Holloway telling me, oh, well, that's what you get because the charter school's putting. And then the next year, I'm like planning on that money. It's like, where's the money now? Oh, we're going to take care of that for you. So yeah, it would be nice to see that because that could be an immediate incentive, as Steve was saying, for district school. So.
I think the management too is important to be clear about. So if it's a co-located charter on a district campus, the district principal will be the manager of the district staff. That's important to know and recognize. That has pros and cons to it, and depends how you approach that. So if you are a charter, it's there's like the one way to think about it is, hey, that's great, they're going to deal with all the stuff that I don't want to deal with, but at the same time, you want to be included in meetings so that you can have joint decision making. So I think you're going to want to be clear with the two principals or more principals around what that looks like. Which meetings are you included in? Which ones aren't you? Who doesn't? Because then you can build resentment, I think, between the principals. So the district principal could say, well, I'm dealing with all the stuff that they don't want to deal with, and that's not fair. And so, so I think those are some of the challenges that you want to recognize. And in terms of performance and those kinds of conversations around staff, it's just really, really, really important to build the protocols we talked about earlier so that you can have some of those potentially tougher conversations.
And that's another reason why I'm really passionate about the conversation around M&O, because being on 3 sites, I can see there's a definite difference in the expectations for the maintenance crews or the custodial crews on the different campuses. And they're, I would say 2 of the 3 are very, like, the custodial crew really owns that campus and has pride. And if something doesn't look right, it's because, they need to get on it because that's their baby. And we have our 3rd campus. It's if things don't look right, it's because he doesn't have time. I'm too busy. Now I've got all these extra kids on the campus. I'll never be able to clean everything the way it's supposed to be cleaned, and he has a lot of excuses. But I don't manage him, so I can't give. I don't even know if it's appropriate to give feedback to the principal. And when those are protocols we haven't really established, so I think that'd be helpful to start from there.
Yeah, I definitely ran into a lot of challenges at the beginning of the year with that. Are we going to get paid overtime, or do you have money in your budget to pay the custodians to clean the floors? And that was a huge issue. So I did hire a school aide to work with the plant manager to make sure he has all the supplies, to make sure that he can keep up, because they were just emptying trash. They weren't sweeping the floors, they weren't mopping the floors. And so that was a huge issue when you have less than 1,500 kids for a 3,000 person campus, but they have to keep up that campus and then say, well, this is your school. No, all of this is your school. we're renters, and so we need your support. But that's definitely why the communication protocol with the plant manager as well as the principal, you build a relationship with people who can respond to your needs. If the principal is not available or doesn't want to have that conversation with that person.
And Kenya, I wanted to go back to a point you were starting to make earlier about schedule coordination. Could you talk a little bit more about how challenging, if it has been challenging to coordinate that with your co-located partner, and whether it's drop off, lunch, passing periods, anything like that, and just sort of keeping with the theme of the workshop, what lessons have you learned from that?
Good. So where we are physically, we're completely separated from the high school. So we have lunch tables there. It's outdoors. So we're doing what we need to do in that regard. So there's less transition. I just wanted access to the softball fields, exclusive access, and I didn't want access to everything else because I didn't need it. So we worked from that, and then we have shared priorities. So if the principal, that's why my secretaries and his secretary works well together. They make sure if there's a game and all these people are coming to the homecoming game that we know maybe we can dismiss students early. This visitors lot is going to be full, so you want to make sure you highlight all your major things that you have on your campus. We have parent meetings every second Monday of the month. Those are sacred. We use the NPR room on their site. So it's very important that just not between the principals, but also the office managers and the assistant principals who are in charge of scheduling or other niches, that the principal just has a overall view, but people who really are in that, doing that kind of trench work, that you know who they are and you communicate that with them. And you can Google share your calendar. So those have been great things that we've done, and that's all built upon relationship with the people that you work with. We came in, we respect their community, we respect their space, and so we come in with that attitude, and then we acknowledge and or show gratitude when we do get things that we need to get done. So lesson learned is relationship with not just the principal, but with the office staff, with the plant manager. Very important, and constant communication, informal, formal, safety, very huge. I know you spoke very concretely about things that need to take place between school leadership to ensure the safety of all students. And that's what I would leave you all with.
Anyone on the panel, any other thoughts to add on schedule coordination?
I have one more thought on shared staff, which I think is relevant. Like, depending on how blended, like merged your models are or separate, if they're will depend on the answer to paying into district staff or paying into something. Like, I think if most models are pretty merged, so like the STEM pilot that we're working on at Hollenbeck, Linda just walked into the room. I mentioned it earlier. We're kind of working collaboratively around what services are needed, and therefore each school is kind of doing what they need to do to pay into that, and it's being very collaboratively determined. I think if you're a charter like a Jordan with Green Dot and the partnership, Jordan is paying in for certain services that their students will get. If they're very separate, you may not need that on a campus. So like we also have charters like City of Angels and Hollenbeck. It does its own thing, and they're just kind of on their own doing their thing. So I think understanding what the expectations are, because if you're going to expect services, I think the other school will expect some payment in for those services, and that will be an important thing. And it actually comes in conflict sometimes because charters have different rate schedules and things like that. Like on the overtime example is a good example of that. And it's just kind of understanding where the other person's coming from, the other school's coming from, so that those tensions don't bubble to the surface in the middle of the year when you've got a stressful event that you're trying to run and whatnot. And
for everyone on the panel, I want to touch upon one topic real quick before we throw it to the audience for questions. And some of you touched upon it already a little bit in terms of student recruitment. For those of you that have schools with your co-located partner where you're serving the same grades, how has that recruitment and enrollment been handled? And that would include, mid-year transfers if that's the case. For those of you with campuses with different grades, have parents had any concerns in particular about that? For example, if parents of middle school children having concerns about being shared with the high school campus, and talk about any of those challenges or benefits of any sort of conversation like that. Anyone on the panel, feel free.
You're loving it.
Yeah, initially, as I stated earlier, the parents were very afraid of the decision to co-locate at Crenshaw High School. But once I formed a parent cadre, and they were in charge of expressing their issues and getting them addressed, I also invited the principal to come and speak at my parent meetings. So the relationship was established in the beginning. This is the new vision for Crenshaw High School. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going. And so when they saw us as a united front, saying that we're here to educate all children, they felt more comfortable. I would say after school is a big issue because our 8th graders, they're interesting as they're transitioning to seeing themselves as high schoolers. A great example, I don't want to ramble. 13 of my boys did not participate in culmination this past year. Our goal is that 100% of them culminate and go on to high school. And so with that opportunity, I asked the counselor at Crenshaw High School to bring some boys that didn't have perfect stories to then talk to my students so they can counsel them through the process of what's next. No, you didn't culminate, but what's next for you? And this is what I've done in my challenges, and this is where I'm going. And these boys, they're in college now, and they were able to share their stories with my boys, which inspired them to do better. So there's a great deal of streamlining them through that process, getting counselors, and when there's college day, having the kids go to college day at their school site to participate in that. The mentorship piece was very huge. And Mr. Corley came and he spoke to my students because it's a part of the counseling piece. What's next for you because you're still going to go on to high school and the expectations that you're going to graduate from high school, but how can we change this and make it into a learning experience? So that's been very positive, and like I said, he comes to my 8th grade meetings to speak to the parents because he wants my students to go to his high school. So part of that is added benefit for him. If he can turn this school around with the magnet programs that are there, he can attract a different type of student to his school. So those are all benefits.
The most successful examples we've had are where there are structured processes through the Zone of Choice office in LA Unified. So LA Unified is moving to regional zones of choice. We have 2 that we work with in Boyle Heights, which is Roosevelt Mendez, and next year will be the STEM pilot included in that. And then the Jordan Green Dot is a zone of choice, and it's a very structured process with clear expectations, standards established on how you're recruiting, so that it's sort of seen at parity. And I think a lot of it is done jointly. So the recruitment meetings are done jointly. Everyone creates their own materials. There's some expectations around what those materials look like, but it's not, everyone running off doing their own thing, because I think then it can be very confusing both to the community and to the schools on the receiving end. That's at least the most successful set of examples we've had. I mean, the world is opening up, I think, to much more student choice options in LA, and I think those are going to be ongoing set of questions about what that looks like, and there's lots of details behind what I just said, so it's not to oversimplify that, but I think, again, it gets back to if you have communication, if you have some clear structures that you can work through, in this case LA Unified has their Zone of Choice office, then I think you can actually move forward productively.
Great. And with that, I want to make sure we have some time for audience questions. Feel free to say your questions. We have a very experienced panel that has been doing this, or is, and is currently doing this. So I'll make sure we have time for you to ask any questions that's on your mind. Anyone?
Mine,
Yeah.
it's immediately following up with what you're saying about the zone of choice. My understanding is charters are kind of shut out of that now. Does anybody have any experience with the zone of choice stuff?
The one that I mentioned with Green Dot is where it's structured jointly with the Zone of Choice office, and I think that's probably unique to that campus.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the formal legal agreement is about what that looks like, but that's one where it's worked pretty well. I mean, in our first year, I remember there were many conversations around, let's go to the middle schools together. How do we do this? This is before the Zone of Choice really got engaged. So it was more like you can do similar things without that, in my experience. So we went jointly to Drew Middle School, to Markham Middle School, to the various middle schools, and shared information about what the program was, answered questions. There were panel discussions with school leaders in the community. That's like on the more structured side of things. Obviously, in most cases, charters are recruiting, on their own.
And how does that, just a follow up, how does that kind of go with Zimmer's motion? Because I thought that also shut charters out of public school campuses.
Question.
Does anybody know?
That's a great question.
Steve question.
That's definitely a Steve question.
I do think though, like on the district side, like because we're running district schools, the district schools have to recognize the reality of the world that we're operating in. I think that's a huge shift in mindset. So for the district principals in the room, I don't know if you have some experience there as well.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it's
over the 5 years.
just
Sure.
a huge mindset shift that
Yeah.
you're not going to just get your ECAST and get your norm numbers. You're actually going to need to really create a compelling vision that the community buys into and students opt in.
Yeah, I definitely. I concur. There you go.
Other questions?
So we're moving to our first co-location and kind of getting that startup process. I know, Kendra, you mentioned you didn't have phones for 3 months. So kind of like, what were key insights that you learned as you first moved into a co-location, logistically, to get everything into place, telephone, internet? Because like internet, I'm hitting hiccups right now. So any kind of advice would really be appreciated.
Well, it really depends on the efficiency of who's working at your CMO and how they coordinate with the district, because the scheduling it could be a headache. And then you have to have your perfect plan and then your plan for the reality. So we use our cell phones for the first 3 months of school. Because our bandwidth, we don't have a extended amount of bandwidth. So currently now, if 60 kids are on the internet, our phones don't work because our phones are connected to the internet. We're trying to solve that issue with the district because we have to separate our internet service. So you just tell teachers, before all these wonderful things, you had, some chalk and a board. And so get ready for that and keep your staff happy with the little things, donuts or coffee or something like that, because they can get frustrated if kids can't watch something on YouTube or whatever lessons that they set up. So you do want to not scare them off, but be very realistic about that time challenge and alternatives to how you can solve that problem. There's no real issue, concrete thing I can tell you. Is to be flexible, adjust when you need to, and focus on the things that you can fight for, your non-negotiables. And make sure you execute on those non-negotiables. But that was just something that happened. We didn't expect, but a similar challenge when we co-located with Alliance. So we were prepared with our phones. Yeah.
Can I just throw in a little philosophical way of looking at it, especially in LA Unified and just dealing with many structures and situations. Bill James, you know the story of Moneyball, the Oakland A's. Okay, so Oakland A's they're like destroying it every year, and they took a different path because they didn't have $120 million to buy the world's greatest lineup, right? So Bill James' philosophy was there's always a better solution to the problem. So just keep that in mind and use that as your mantra, because when we opened the school the first year, we could have waited for LA Unified to get us up online and get us up and running, but we decided not to do that and to find other solutions to that. So that's what I would recommend.
I would just want to say a couple things. As far as like timing, it usually took them a while for IT to come in and partition the alarm. So you may be stuck on the custodian's schedule for your first couple months or whatever, and be ready for that, or make other arrangements. I was just thinking, if it needs to get done, we'll work late. In the first couple months of the school, it usually took weekends and things like that. So have a plan for that. And then second thing is, I don't know if your office is already set up, but one thing that is sometimes overlooked is like they'll give you a former classroom and say, here's your office space, and there's no electrical outlet that's equipped to handle a high capacity copier, and so you need to plan for time for them to rewire for an office copier.
And then also the PA system. We heard everything. We heard everything. We heard everything. So it took about 6 months for them not to have us listen to all their announcements. which was very frustrating for my teachers because it interrupted instruction. But that's another thing too, just to be aware of, they're not used to new people being there, so it never was an issue. But I would definitely just make sure that you have a conversation about the PA system if the school uses it a lot.
We had a question in the back. Yes.
I just wanted to add to the question that was asked. So I'm Linda Del Cueto, Autonomous Schools Administrator with LA Unified, working very closely with Loyola Heights STEM, as Mark mentioned. And I wanted to point out that what I've learned, I represent pilot schools in LA Unified, is even within the district, we struggle to have better communication between district facilities and district ITD. So when ITD was mentioned by the panel, that's really key, and I don't know who independent charters are assigned to work with in terms of the district with ITD, but that's made all the difference for me in supporting pilot schools and district schools on co-locations. The partitioning of the EPA system is not difficult. There's no reason it should take 6 months. And so if there's any way that I can be helpful, I'll make a note of this so that you talk to Jose Gutierrez and see if we can connect charter schools with somebody from ITD to eliminate and facilitate that.
Great, thank you for that. We'll close out the panel now, so that, but as we do that, it'd be great if each of you could spend a minute or two just to talk about any sort of final lesson learned or like the overall advice you'd like to leave our audience with.
Can we just see if there are any other questions?
Sure. If there are. Yeah.
Is it possible, can you bring your own cleaning crew? Or you're not allowed to because it's their
No,
space?
it's
you have
a
to
union.
use
It's
their
a union
and-
site, and so we run
It's a
into problems
union
with
site, so
sizing.
you can't bring someone on to.
Yeah, and we couldn't. The wiring for a copier is a $390 job that we shopped around, but the district charges $2,400.
Wow.
And
No,
we
I'm
couldn't have
familiar
somebody else
with
come
the
in for that. So,
Play-Doh
but we couldn't use, we can't use anybody for maintenance or for locksmith or for cleaning crews because that gets in trouble with the union that's there.
This is a very specific question about the copiers. I'm actually just emailing about that. We've been working on it for the past month now. Did you need to just get a dedicated plug? Because this is actually relevant for everybody too. Did you just need to get a dedicated, or they have to completely rewire it for voltage?
It's a different voltage. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's a different amperage. Actually, it's a higher amperage that comes through. So it does have to have a different.
And not just to be dedicated, because I'm being told that because it's a brand new school, we only need to have a dedicated, not different amperage.
Oh yeah, if it's a brand new school, it's a different beast. You should be fine. You
Yeah.
want to just double check it.
We just wanted.
Yeah, we didn't have to do that. We didn't have to go through that.
Whatever the
Yeah.
D word is.
Okay. Something that this is changing the subject back to Jan's question. What we did use though is parent volunteers for cleaning. Like when the cleaning crew when the rooms were really horrible, we would get parents to come through like on a weekly basis and help us sweep or things like that.
But
I'm also thinking community service with kids, but
Yeah.
yeah, you
that'd
can
be great.
incorporate. The one thing I was going to say too, you might want to check the schedule because they might not be including those number of kids on campus. That's been a common problem among M&O and co-located schools. They don't count the charter school kids, and they'll count some of the kids, but not all of them. So.
I have a campus aide, and the plant manager we have an agreement. So. We have an understanding, and so that works out well, but it's one person. And like when they came to scrub the floors, I just got them a case of water, thank you so much. So just showing gratitude when they do come in to make sure everything's done, I've done that as well.
I taught in LA Unified Schools, I swept my room too, so just saying.
But the charters too, one of the things that you can do that a public or just an LA Unified school, sometimes you have more trouble doing is especially during this time of year, buying wax. So the plant managers, sometimes it's just harder to do that. So sometimes the charter school can cut a check and do that right away. So it's a real benefit. If the plant manager knows that, then also that helps to build that relationship. Right.
All right. Any other final questions? Okay, any other final words from any of the panelists?
I don't really have a closing thought, but would love to give anybody my business card, or if you want my email address, if anybody wants to follow up on things later on. Happy to do
And
that.
the next piece on the calendar is at 11:45. We'll head right across the way for lunch, so we definitely have some time in here if you want to ask some individual questions.
Same here, happy to help from the more the district perspective, I guess, but happy to help at all with anyone who's interested. The only parting word that I would say is just remembering it's a journey that's starting on now for some of you, and it's been ongoing for others, and that it's going to take a few turns, but just remembering like the flexibility that goes along with that, because for sure things will go off the rails or feel like they are at some point, and just how do you get them back on collectively.
With that, we'll conclude the panel, and folks will be available. Please continue the dialogue throughout the day, and thank you for coming.